I wasn't supposed to be there yet. The plan was to arrive fashionably late, sneak in without drawing attention, and catch Mia off guard, in a good way. She loved surprises, at least she used to. It was our thing. Ever since the first year we started dating, I'd show up to her events a little late with her favorite drink in hand, or some small inside joke we shared. Something to remind her I saw her, even in a crowd. That night was no different in my mind. It was New Year's Eve, technically her company's annual holiday bash. But let's be honest, it was their excuse to drink champagne on the firm's dime and post glamorous photos under the illusion of office camaraderie. I wasn't even planning to stay long. Just long enough to make an appearance, kiss her at midnight, and maybe sneak off early to start our own celebration. But none of that happened. I walked in just before 11. The party was in full swing. Gold streamers draped across the ceiling, soft jazz in the background, fake laughter in every corner. Everyone dressed like they were auditioning for a commercial. I scanned the room, looking for her. I didn't have to look far. There she was, Mia, center of the room. Golden in every sense of the word. Not just the dress, but the way the light hit her hair, the way people seemed to orbit around her like she was the only reason they were there. And then there was him. Tall, dark suit, perfect jawline, Jared, from advertising. I recognized him from a dinner we attended once, months ago. He shook my hand too hard and looked at Mia too long. I remember that. His hand was on her waist. Not lightly, not like a coworker casually posing for a picture. His fingers curled inward, like he was holding something that belonged to him. And Mia didn't flinch. She leaned in closer, her lips just barely brushing his ear. She said something and he laughed. It wasn't forced laughter. It wasn't even polite. It was the kind of laugh people make when something feels private, when they're in on something no one else is supposed to know about. I just stood there, frozen, like someone hit pause on the world except for them. She hadn't seen me yet, or maybe she had, and that made it worse. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, or maybe I just didn't want to believe the conclusion I'd already jumped to. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe it was just the angle. Maybe it was just party energy. Maybe I was being jealous, paranoid. Maybe. And then she turned. Her eyes met mine, and she smiled. Not a guilty smile. Not a startled one either. It was calm, like she'd been expecting me. She said something to Jared. I couldn't hear what, then walked over to me slowly, still smiling like this was all part of some script she wrote. You weren't supposed to be here yet, she said, voice sweet, like I'd walked in on a surprise party for myself. Were you spying on me? I blinked. No, I wanted to surprise you. She tilted her head, amused. Well, surprise, she said, gesturing toward the room with a little laugh. Then, out of nowhere, she dropped this line. Casual as a breeze. Relax. It was just a game. I wanted to see how you'd react. A game. Like what I saw, that touch, that lean in, that moment that looked way too and asterisk mate. Was just her playing dress up in someone else's arms. A social experiment. I forced a small smile, the kind you use when you're trying not to ruin something. And how'd I do? She laughed again, eyes scanning my face like she was still deciding. You passed. You're here, aren't you? We stood there in the middle of the party, people swirling around us, music swelling behind her words. But it all sounded muffled, distant, like the moment existed in a different room. I didn't know what to say. I just looked at her. This woman I knew better than anyone, or thought I did, and suddenly realized I didn't recognize her at all. She wrapped her arms around my neck and kissed my cheek, pulling me into the room like we were the picture-perfect couple. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just watched her whisper into another man's ear while his hand rested exactly where mine used to. I'm glad you're here, she said as she linked her fingers with mine. Now it's a real party. And that was that. She went back to socializing, like nothing had happened. And I followed her, because what else do you do when the floor's falling out from beneath you? But you're the only one who seems to notice? We stayed at the party another hour or so. She introduced me to some new hires, toasted with executives, took photos with everyone, including Jared. Always with that same laugh, that same look in her eyes. And I played along. I played the boyfriend. I smiled for the camera. I stood by her side while everyone acted like nothing was off, even though I was drowning in it. But here's what hit me the hardest. When she said it was a game, I didn't laugh. Not really. Something in my gut twisted, and I didn't know why at the time. I chalked it up to jealousy, insecurity, maybe just the champagne. But it wasn't any of that. It was my body recognizing a truth my mind hadn't caught up to yet. She wasn't joking. She wasn't teasing. She wasn't testing me for fun. She was telling me, in the most elegant, terrifying way, that she was already gone. And I was too distracted by the music, the lights, the illusion of us, to realize that her version of us had already expired. That night, lying next to her, I kept replaying the moment in my head, her voice echoing, "It was just a game, but games have rules. And this one, it was already rigged." The day after the party, the world felt off-kilter. I woke up before Mia did, the sunlight stretching across the floor like it didn't know how unwelcome it was. She lay next to me in perfect stillness, her face calm, untouched by the chaos that had taken root in my head. I watched her for a while, not in that romantic, poetic way they show in movies, but like a man watching a painting he suddenly isn't sure is real. What kind of person does something like that and then sleeps like nothing happened? She stirred eventually, reached for her phone before even looking at me. Notifications lit up her screen, and she smiled at one of them, too long, too softly. Then she glanced over and gave me that smile, the same one she wore last night, the smile of someone who thinks they're still in control. "Good morning," she said. I nodded. "Morning." And that was it. She got up, showered, started her day like it was any other. And I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling, drowning in a single thought I couldn't shake. What else had I missed? That's when the memories started coming back, one after another, things I had noticed in the moment but never really questioned. Or worse, the things I had questioned, but let her talk me out of, because I didn't want to be that guy. Now, they were stacking up like evidence in a case I didn't even know I was building. Like the time 3 months ago when she suddenly had to go on a last-minute work trip to Chicago on a Friday afternoon. She'd packed fast, like she already knew what to bring. She wore a new coat I hadn't seen before and left with barely a kiss goodbye. When I called her that night, she didn't answer. Said the signal was bad. When I texted, it took hours for her to respond. I told myself she was just busy. I even defended her to my own doubt. But that coat? I never saw it again. Or last month. The Saturday she said she was going to a spa with Claire, her friend from college. She came home late, hair loose, smelling not like lavender or oils or whatever spas usually use, but like a scent I recognized from cologne ads. Not a brand I wore, something sharper, muskier. When I asked how it went, she mumbled something about deep tissue and facials and how exhausted she was. Then she collapsed into bed without even showering. I remember lying next to her that night, noticing the faint red marks on her neck, just below her jaw. I told myself they were from the massage. Stupid. And there were other things. Smaller, but now they lit up like flares. She used to be careless with her phone. Left it on the table, screen up. Never had a password. Now she took it with her everywhere. Bathroom, shower, bedroom, and she started setting it face down. I asked about it once, and she laughed, said I was getting paranoid, and that she had work stuff on there. I believed her. I always believed her. Then there was the way she dressed. Not at home. At home, she wore sweats and one of my old hoodies. But for her work dinners, she wore heels that made her taller than me, dresses that hugged every curve, lipstick I hadn't seen since our anniversary 2 years ago. Once, I said something like, "You look amazing," and she replied, "It's for the clients." I smiled, told her she'd knock them dead. But deep down, something twisted, and I ignored it, because that's what love makes you do. It makes you doubt yourself before you ever doubt them. It wasn't just the physical things, either. It was the way she talked to me or didn't. She used to tell me everything. Her day, her dreams, her weird thoughts. We'd lie in bed and just talk. Now, there were more silences than stories. More deflection than connection. If I asked how her day went, she'd say, "Fine," then ask me something random to change the subject. If I tried to dig deeper, she'd accuse me of being moody or tired or too sensitive. At some point, I started apologizing for asking her questions. That's when I should have known something had changed. When the person you love starts making you feel like the problem for caring, that's not love anymore. That's erasure. The hardest memory to look at now was from a few weeks before the party. We were at a family gathering, my cousin's birthday, something simple. I'd gone to grab us both drinks from the kitchen, and when I came back, she was outside on the patio, leaning on the railing, phone to her ear. Her expression was tight, serious, nothing like the party energy around her. When she saw me watching from inside, she turned away quickly, like she didn't want me to read her lips. When she came back in, she was all smiles. Said it was Claire again. Always Claire. But I remember the look in her eyes. Not guilt exactly. Something colder. Like she was calculating how much I had seen, how much I understood. And when she figured it wasn't much, she just let it go. So I let it go too. I was complicit. I trained myself not to look too closely. I knew if I did, I wouldn't like what I saw. But now it was all I could see. Her patterns, the gaps, the lies hidden in polite words. I started checking things I never used to care about. Her calendar, her browser history wiped clean too often, receipts left in pockets, Uber rides at odd times from places she wasn't supposed to be. I wasn't digging out of spite. I was trying to survive something I couldn't name yet. I needed to know if the floor I was standing on was real or just painted wood that could break at any second. I started realizing I was the only one still trying, the only one hoping. She had moved on in some invisible way, maybe not physically, maybe not yet, but emotionally. She had let go, and I had no idea when it happened. Maybe it started small. A text she never replied to. A night she stayed out just a little too long. A compliment she dismissed instead of returning. Or maybe it was always there, waiting for a moment like now to reveal itself. Maybe love doesn't die with a bang. Maybe it just gets chipped away. One ignored call, one vague excuse, one lipstick-stained coffee mug at a time. The worst part? I didn't even know what hurt more, the possibility she had cheated, or the certainty she no longer saw me as worth being honest with. That night, I lay in bed next to her again, her back to me, breathing steady, and I just stared at the ceiling, wondering how many lies you can sleep beside before you forget who you are. The truth didn't come in a dramatic moment. It didn't explode into my life with a shout or a slammed door. It arrived quietly, almost politely, like it didn't want to be caught at all. It started with her laptop. Mia never left her devices lying around. She guarded her phone like it was national security, and her MacBook was rarely more than a few feet from her. But that afternoon, she'd left in a hurry. Said she was running out for oat milk and a quick walk to clear her head. She had been moody all morning. I didn't press. The tension between us had been thick, and honestly, I was too mentally drained to argue. I was walking past the kitchen when I noticed the screen still glowing. It sat open on the counter, softly humming. Her wallpaper, a photo of us from 2 summers ago, was blurred behind a browser window. I almost kept walking. Almost. But something stopped me. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the way the tab was titled simply, Archives. Not a website. Folder. A file directory. Let me be clear, I wasn't looking for dirt. I wasn't trying to be the jealous boyfriend rummaging through her things. I just wanted to know the truth. Or maybe I already did, and I was looking for something to confirm it so I could stop telling myself I was crazy. I moved the mouse. The folder popped open. Inside, it was clinical. Neat. Subfolders by month. PDFs, **TS, travel confirmations. Emails saved as text files. At first glance, nothing scandalous. Just an organized person keeping track of life. But then I clicked on one labeled, Emotional Review, NOV, Deck. I didn't even know what that meant. I thought it might be therapy notes or some journaling exercise. What it was a blueprint. A blueprint of a woman building her exit. The document was a list. Bullet points, each one more personal than the last. Dylan understands me on a deeper level. He listens. Tom doesn't see me anymore. It's like I'm fading in his world. This isn't just about love. It's about survival. I need to leave cleanly. No drama. No guilt. Dylan is safer emotionally. I can grow with him. Tom would forgive me, but that's not a reason to stay. My name on that list didn't feel like mine. It was like reading a report about someone else. Then came the dagger. New Year's will be the pivot point. After that, I'll start distancing. No more pretending. The room spun for a second. She wasn't just cheating or even just emotionally gone. She had scheduled the end of our relationship like it was a project deadline. I closed the file not because I was done, but because I couldn't breathe. I leaned on the counter, head low, trying to steady myself. But then I saw another folder, titled simply, Trips. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Hotel receipts. Flights booked for 2. One from a weekend in November where she told me she was attending a branding seminar in Seattle. Except the booking wasn't for Seattle. It was for Carmel by the Sea, a romantic coastal town we once talked about visiting together. The room had been booked under her name and another one. Dylan Marks. There it was. The name. The same one from the emotional review. And suddenly it all clicked. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. She'd been preparing her life without me for months. Maybe longer. She'd been taking emotional inventory, weighing the pros and cons of my existence like I was a lease she was ready to terminate. I went cold. Not angry. Not yet. Just hollow. I should have felt rage. Should have thrown the laptop across the room. But instead, I felt like a man standing in the ruins of a house that had been on fire for months. I just hadn't smelled the smoke until now. When Mia came home, I had already closed the laptop and sat at the table, staring into a cup of untouched coffee. She looked at me, confused, then cautious. "You okay?" she asked, her voice light but watchful. I looked up slowly, measured. "Yeah," I said. "Just tired." She smiled, that same damn smile, and walked past me like nothing was burning. But now I knew what she was. And that knowledge, it wasn't power. It was poison. Slow, creeping, irreversible. 2 days after I opened that folder, my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in months. Hannah, Mia's younger sister. She and I were never close. Not because we didn't get along, but because Mia kept a certain wall between her relationships. She always made it clear that family stayed in one lane, and I stayed in another. Still, Hannah was kind whenever we crossed paths. Polite, a little quiet. She had Mia's eyes, but not her sharpness, not her bite. So when her name appeared on my screen, I almost didn't answer. But something told me I should. "Hey," I said, trying not to sound like a man unraveling. There was a pause. Then softly, "Tom, can we meet?" I sat down, surprised. Sure. Is everything okay?" Another pause. Then, "Not really, but I think you deserve to know a few things. Can you meet me at Comet Cafe in an hour?" An hour later, I sat across from her in a corner booth near the window. The place was mostly empty, except for a couple in sweats sharing pancakes in silence. Hannah looked nervous, like she'd been rehearsing what to say, and now that the moment had come, the words were hiding from her. She didn't order anything, just sipped water through a straw and stared at the envelope in her lap. When she finally looked up at me, she whispered, "I'm sorry. I should have said something earlier." "What is it?" I asked. "Is this about Mia?" She nodded, then slid the envelope across the table. Her fingers lingered on it like it was radioactive. Inside were **TS. Messages. Dozens of them. Some from unknown numbers. Some from accounts labeled Laura M. One of them read, "Can't stop thinking about you. Being with you feels like who I'm supposed to be." Another, "We'll figure it out soon. I'm almost done pretending." And one more circled in red, "Tom won't notice anyway. He's too predictable." I read that line over and over again. Too predictable. As if being consistent, loyal, dependable, that was a flaw. That was my weakness. She was messaging Dylan under a fake name? I asked, trying to steady my voice. Hannah nodded. Laura was our mom's middle name. She used it in high school too, when she didn't want people to know it was her. She's done this before? Silence. Hannah looked down at her hands. Then she said, Mia's always had this thing where she needs control. Even as a kid, she'd create these little secret versions of herself and test people. Make bets with her friends about what she could get away with. It was a game to her, a way to stay one step ahead. I felt like I was falling through the floor. Hannah continued. She used to sneak out in high school and lie to our parents about where she was. She once told her boyfriend she was out of town, then went on a date with someone else, just to see if she could pull it off. When she got caught, she cried, said she was confused, blamed the guy for making her feel cornered. And everyone bought it. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Her eyes met mine, finally steady. Because I kept quiet too long. I thought maybe she'd changed. Or maybe you were different. But when I saw her at Christmas, she said something that scared me. What? Hannah hesitated. She said, I think I've outgrown him. Like you were a jacket she didn't wear anymore. No anger. No sadness. Just detachment. My chest felt hollow. I couldn't tell what hurt more, the betrayal or the casual cruelty of her words. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a phase, placeholder. I looked at Hannah. And you didn't say anything then? She winced. I didn't know what to say. She's my sister. But then, I found those messages on her iPad last week. She left it at our parents' house over the holidays. Didn't log out of her account. I saw everything. The texts to Dylan, the plans, even a note she wrote titled Life After. My throat tightened. What did it say? She listed out goals for the year. Moving in with Dylan, getting a new job in another city, starting therapy to reclaim her autonomy. And under a bullet called Loose Ends, she wrote, Tom, make it amicable, no mess. I sat back, stunned. She really thought she had it all figured out. I muttered, like I was some appointment she needed to cancel. Hannah didn't speak, just gave me a sad look. A look that said, I wish I could say this was surprising. I stared at the envelope again, at the words Mia wrote to another man while sleeping beside me every night. I wondered how many times she looked me in the eye while mentally drafting her goodbye. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the confidence behind it, the arrogance. She didn't think she'd get caught. She didn't think she'd need to lie much longer. And she certainly didn't think I'd be sitting in a cafe with her sister, looking at her private blueprints. I closed the envelope slowly and slid it back toward Hannah. Thank you, I said. For real. I know that wasn't easy. She shook her head. I should have done it sooner. I stood to leave, but before I did, she said one more thing. She does this, Tom. She finds people who make her feel safe, builds a world with them, then burns it down when it stops exciting her. And she always lands on her feet. You don't have to be her next casualty. I nodded. I won't be. And for the first time in days, I meant it. I sat on the porch that night, the envelope still in my hands. The sun was setting behind the houses across the street, painting everything in orange and gold, like the world was trying to soften the blow. But it couldn't. Not this time. I must have read that line from the messages 100 times. Tom won't notice anyway. He's too predictable. Funny thing is, she was right. I was predictable. I was loyal. I was the guy who showed up, who remembered birthdays, who kept his promises even when no one was watching. But to her, that wasn't something to value. It was something to exploit. That's when the thought hit me. Maybe I wasn't the first. Maybe I wasn't even special. The idea rattled around in my head until I couldn't ignore it anymore. I texted Hannah. Hey, can I ask you something? She replied almost instantly. Hannah, of course. Has she done this before? Really done this? She called me instead of texting. I picked up on the first ring. Yes, she said before I even asked the question out loud. She has. More than once. I felt it in my chest, like a second betrayal layered over the first. She told me about a guy she dated in college. Hannah continued. Said he was sweet but boring. He wanted to marry her. She said yes at first, then ghosted him 2 weeks before the wedding. Just vanished. Later, I found out she took money from their joint savings account and never returned it. I didn't know what to say, but she wasn't done. There was also her friend. You remember Cassidy? From her old job? I asked. Yeah. Mia got close with her boyfriend. Real close. Said it started as flirting. Cassidy trusted her completely. Then one night, Cassidy walked in on them, Mia and the guy, on her own couch. Jesus. And at work, Hannah sighed. She had a boss who trusted her with sensitive data. Mia found a way to transfer money between departments without oversight. It wasn't huge, like just under the threshold that would trigger alerts, but it added up. She framed it as budget errors. He lost his job. She got promoted. It was like dominoes falling, one after another, each one toppling a piece of the woman I thought I knew. She wasn't chaotic. She wasn't lost. She was methodical. She doesn't just fall out of love, I said quietly. She builds exits. Yes, Hannah whispered. And she uses people like scaffolding, support until the building's complete. Then she tears it all down and walks away. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the dining table, the lights off, reading through everything again. My laptop open, Hannah's screensh *TS beside it, and my thoughts circling the same dark truth. She hadn't broken my trust by accident. It was intentional, crafted. She knew exactly how far she could push before I noticed. And when she thought I'd never figure it out, she wrote about me like I was already a memory. I started digging not just into our relationship, but into her patterns. There were clues, old emails, passwords she reused, shared drives she forgot to unlink from. I pieced together fragments from the past few years, messages she never deleted, folders from previous jobs. She didn't even bother changing her tactics. The same structure, the same emotional distancing, the same cold strategy dressed up as self-help jargon. In one archived file from 2020, labeled Cycle Reset, she wrote, Phase 1, Present, Connect, Anchor. Phase 2, Mirror, Become their ideal. Phase 3, Build detachment slowly. Allow confusion to grow. Phase 4, Transition, New environment, new person. Phase 5, Sever. Move fast. Don't look back. It read like a playbook, like something she'd refined over time, and I had played my part perfectly. I remember telling her once that I admired how self-aware she was. She smiled at me and said, "You kinda have to be, right?" I didn't realize she meant it literally, that she wasn't just self-aware. She was architecting her entire life with that awareness as a wee *P***N. I wondered if Dylan knew. Probably not. He was still in phase 2, most likely. Still being mirrored. Still thinking he'd found someone who just got him. Poor guy. He was going to wake up in a year or two and find himself labeled a loose end in a bullet point. She didn't just play me. She studied me. She watched what made me tick. What made me stay, what made me doubt myself. And when she knew exactly how I worked, she started the exit. Not because I failed her, but because she was done using me. I thought about confronting her, about printing everything and laying it out like a crime scene. But then I stopped, because I knew what would happen. She'd cry. She'd deflect. She'd turn the conversation into a therapy session. She'd say I was invading her privacy, that I had violated her boundaries, that I'd misunderstood everything. And for a moment, I'd probably believe her. That's how good she was. So instead, I didn't confront her. I observed her. I watched the way she moved around the house, the small lies she told out of habit, how she asked me fewer questions about my day, how she smiled more at her phone than she did at me, and how, when I mentioned anything emotional, she blinked like she was buffering, calculating the right response, not feeling it. She had unplugged already. Emotionally, she had logged out months ago. Now she was just managing the rollout. I started writing it all down. Not because I needed revenge, but because I needed clarity. I wrote down what she said when I confronted her about the cologne. what she wore when she claimed she was at a networking event, the timeline between her Seattle seminar and the Carmel hotel receipt, the text she sent me from bed saying she missed me, sent the same night she told Dylan she felt free. Piece by piece, I saw it for what it was. This wasn't a failing relationship. It was a con job with a long tail, and I was just the latest chapter in a series she had already planned to close. I remembered the storage unit we'd rented 2 years ago, supposedly for old furniture and holiday decorations. It was under her name, but I still had the code. Something told me to go there. Inside, behind a pile of boxes, was a locked case. I broke it open. Inside were documents. Copies of my ID, financial forms, even credit applications I'd never filled out, all signed with my name. There were also multiple passport photos, mine, hers, and 2 others I didn't recognize. But the worst thing? A black notebook labeled Plan B. It wasn't just notes, it was strategy. Timelines, scripts, phrases like, delay confrontation until relocation confirmed. This wasn't someone trying to escape a bad relationship. This was someone building a way to erase me, and she had almost succeeded. I could have vanished quietly, let her walk away untouched, but not after what I found. I hired a lawyer, gathered evidence, reached out to others she'd left behind, a former friend, an ex, even a client she'd burned. We built a case. Fraud, forgery, manipulation. She thought I'd crumble, that I was too predictable. But when the letters arrived from the legal teams, her silence said everything. No more games. No more control. I didn't burn her world down. I exposed it. And then I stepped into my own, without her, without the lies, but with everything she feared I'd never have: clarity, control, and the courage to never look back.